What's up, Shred Sexies? Welcome back. Death to the Fingers. Many asked, so here it is, the Death to the Fingers pentatonic workout. And woo, let me tell you, I'm going to put you through the paces. Now listen, if you can play every stage of this video, then you're absolutely ready for the major scale stuff. But they get hard. Obviously, it keeps getting more challenging the further you go into the video. So when it starts getting beyond your reach, just stop right there. And then, of course, you can always come back later and test yourself and be like, okay, how far can I get through the video now? Now, listen, I don't play them fast. It's not like super shred speed stuff. It's nothing to do with that. It's just these techniques, if you will, are quite challenging. And so it takes a little while to get them under your fingers. And I do a whole bunch of them and a whole bunch of variations too. So good times had by all. Grab the axe, see how well you do. And then when you hit the wall, if you will, just start practicing those ones until you get them up to speed and then keep moving on in the video. Good luck. All right, step one here obviously has to be laying out the table right. We're playing in the key of G major, so I move to the 3rd fret of the low E string, and I'm going to start by layering these patterns over top of that starting position, right? So we're going to play the Ionian position as far as the major scale is concerned in the classical method. And then we're also going to play the pentatonic so we can see that these two pieces of information are inextricably linked. They're not two different things. It's the same thing. One has 7 notes and one only has 5. And therefore, those extra notes from the major scale are going to be incredibly important when you're improvising using the pentatonic scale, because those are the juicy ones you want to hit as the target notes to end your ideas. True story. So we're going to move through the Ionian position, Dorian, Phrygian, and then Mixolydian, then Aeolian before closing the loop back to Ionian. And of course, it just starts again. You know, it just goes 1, 2, 3, 5, 6, and then it goes 1, 2, 3, 5, 6, 1, 2, 3, 5, 6, until hell freezes over. So you're going to hear me go up in the scale, and then the pentatonic, be listening to the sequence of sounds so you start to understand the principle of modalization, where I'm just incrementing through each step of the major scale here, in this case, the pentatonic scale. And I have these 2 flavors at my disposal now, and I want to be able to use them interchangeably. So good luck, and make sure you practice this exercise because it's incredibly important. All right, now we've made the connection essentially between the major scale and its modes and the minor pentatonic scale and its modes, and we can see these things interchangeably. Now it's time to just drop one piece of information. In this case, get rid of the major modes and instead just concentrate on using the minor pentatonic system to work on sort of building up our familiarity, if you will, with the scale. So I'm just going to move through the modes up and down, obviously. This is a very important exercise, ascending one shape and then descending in the next. Of course, make sure you're moving them around to different keys, and then don't always go up. Sometimes start moving down first and then start moving past your target, and of course keep going up so that you get both directions if you happen to be starting in the middle of the fretboard. Next. All right, in this next section, we're going to factor in these whole step sequences in the minor third step sequence from the minor pentatonic scale. So obviously, it just helps us move on a diagonal and lets us cut across multiple shapes, which is very useful for sort of breaking down the fretboard and being able to envision it in smaller sized chunks, if you will. Oh, there's the section from Dorian, or look, it's repeated again up here at Phrygian, or here it is at the sort of Aeolian position, right? So recognizing these little sequences with the minor thirds and with the whole steps obviously is a major level advantage when it comes to pattern recognition, which is one of the main things you need to be able to play fast. So no more yip yapping. Let's get into these bad boys. All right, we're into the groupings here. So groups of three, it's not so bad. A little bit of a learning curve with respect to the technique and whatnot, but I'm pretty sure you guys can handle it. Groups of four, notice on the Ascension, I'm basically playing two shapes side by side. In this case, Mixolydian and Aeolian. So that's a very useful technique for practicing alternate picking and building up speed and pattern recognition again. So don't skip over that one. In the groups of five, you see me do the whole sequence that we did from the last video. So again, descending in groups of five on just two strings before I descend down into the minor pentatonic at the open position, ascend up using the whole step sequence. Then I use groups of seven, nails it. And then of course I use the minor third step pattern to basically show you that you have to practice all of these things together in one big sort of melange, if you will, so that you get the maximum benefit. And of course, there are more. You can start to just play sequences on one string, so 5 notes or 7 and stuff, and then move to the next string. But that'll be explored more in the major scales video. So get on these pentatonic sequences. They're absolutely brutal. And if you're looking for another really killer resource, the one from Frank Gambale's Chop Builder is absolutely devastating, where he starts to mess with the tempo. So when you're ready for that, have a whack at that, but start here. Let's get on it. All right, we're into the irregularities. In this case, we're going to be using string skipping, of course, ascending and descending, exactly like we were doing before with just the straight up pentatonic scale, but now we're going to approach it using string skipping. That's a good time. Remember, of course, start one time where you start ascending on the major mode, and then start the next time you do it around where you're starting with string skipping descending. So you get a totally different vibe. Trust me, it makes a difference. So do both ways, starting on the high E string and then starting on the low E string, or vice versa. And after we get done that, I basically play it backwards. This one throws everyone for a loop. If you're doing it right now, that's great. But of course, you see me go through the entire sequence. This is another way of envisioning the pentatonic scale that's obvious but not obvious, and it's actually kind of tricky because your brain just doesn't actually want to accept the programming because it's like I've done it the other way so many times, which is precisely what this is supposed to combat. All right, let's get into the exercise. All right, in this section, essentially, we're taking the minor pentatonic scale and we're starting to evolve it up. So in the first one, obviously, I'm just adding in the chromatic note. But another reason is now you're getting 3 notes on certain strings and 2 notes on other strings, and that can actually seriously mess with you. I think I might almost bite it a few times in the actual video because my brain was like, dude, it's been a while since you've done this one. And that made me sort of realize that I've been very lazy when it comes to this. Trust me, doing, odd and even groupings on different strings is actually an incredibly useful exercise to train your mind to break out of the whole 3 notes per string stuff, which can be very, very sort of tempting. It doesn't matter when you start or how long you've been doing it. Eventually you kind of get into the 3 notes per string stuff and it's just awesome. But at the same time, doing various combinations of 3 and 2 can be just as cool and just as badass. And at the very end, I do, of course, the full hybrid scale where I'm adding the chromaticism. And then, of course, I'm adding back in those notes from the major modes. And again, I just go through each position of the pentatonic scale. So make sure once you get the pentatonic scale down that you start adding in these extra notes, if you will, in just the context of the scale itself. Okay, and then when you're improvising, you can use them. And then, of course, you can branch out using the other major mode notes that fall outside the actual scale itself. And then you'll be fully equipped to destroy the fretboard. Next. All right, here we are, final boss, essentially 3 and 1 into groups of 4. Listen, this is, it's challenging from a technique position. It's got some big stretches in it, so be careful. If you really want to try on this sort of idea, but you haven't really worked up the stretching and stuff, just move it further up the fretboard, anywhere around the 12th fret and whatnot, and just start doing it there. You should be okay. If you're feeling pain or anything, stop, obviously. This is an incredibly important technique. It lets you build up basically infinite level speed with respect to the pentatonics. And just as far as, again, breaking down the fretboard, you can't really ask for a better methodology. Not only can you go fast, but it really forces you to see these shapes in the tiniest detail, which of course develops your mind to a razor's edge when it comes to this stuff. And then you can just start to develop insane levels of speed, far faster than anybody could ever play with alternate picking and stuff like that. If you need more sort of evidence, you can see Frank Gambale doing sweeping pentatonics. And you'd be like, okay, right. That's how that works. Okay, so I'm showing the slowed down version. Of course, you can also see me putting these two techniques together, because the 4-and-1 when I descend sometimes borrows from the same principles as 3-and-1, where I'm ganging two of these pentatonic shapes together. In the ascension, I'm doing Dorian and Phrygian. And when I come down, when I'm playing on the B string, you can probably see me gang together Mixolydian and Phrygian now, because of the way that the sequence works. It's very difficult for me to get my finger back there to bar and stuff. It just becomes a nightmare. So it's easier to take that note and move it up onto the B string. So I have 3 notes now instead of just 2. And so anytime I get that weird imbalance where I have essentially this minor third interval between the notes where I want to do this sequence, I take that note from behind and I move it onto the same string that I'm working on, and I just find it up there. And you're good to go by just moving to the next position, obviously. So this is the hardest of the hard, of course, and it just keeps getting harder. If you want to see another person just use it to absolutely devastating effect, of course, Rick Graham is another guy that just, he is the shred lord when it comes to this stuff. And it's truly awe-inspiring. So I hope the video helps. Take it slow. Just work on each one of these ideas and then start factoring them all together like you saw me do at the beginning in the improv, where you're sort of having more of a mind to sort of create melodies, motifs, and work on your phrasing. Don't just get lost in the technical land. Try to take that information and use it in a real improvisation situation. And I think you'll find that your learning actually accelerates, because now you have a real world tool you can use when you're doing something fun. Doing this stuff is not exactly that fun, but when you start doing it in an improv, when you're jamming to music or with the band and stuff, it gets a lot more fun, right? So keep that in the back of your mind. Don't just be like, oh, I'll practice this stuff dogmatically. Instead, be like, take this idea, playing things backwards, and then play it along to a backing track or at the jam practice and see if you can't factor it in there. We'll see you guys in the next one.